Ladies and gentlemen, let me tell you something right off the bat. Life will throw at you more curveballs than you think. And the difference between those who win in life and those who just survive isn't always brains or talent. It's emotional intelligence. That's right. It's that magical ability to understand yourself, read others, and navigate the world with your heart just as much as your head. Imagine walking into a room and everything is chaos. People are talking over each other, deadlines are looming, and it feels like the world is spinning faster than you can keep up. Now, most folks would panic. They'd raise their voice, stamp their feet, or just shut down completely. But then there's that one person, the person who takes a breath, looks around, and calmly assesses what's happening. That's the kind of person who has emotional intelligence. And that image right there is the perfect way to start talking about. You see, stories like this grab people. They draw them in because everyone has experienced chaos. Everyone has felt overwhelmed, frustrated, or out of control at some point. And when you open a speech with a scenario like this, you're telling your audience, I understand you. I've been there too. You're building an invisible bridge between yourself and the people listening, a connection that makes everything else, you say, land more powerfully. Starting with a story or scenario isn't just a fancy trick. It's psychology. Our brains are wired to respond to stories. They activate our emotions. They make us picture ourselves in the scene. And suddenly, abstract ideas like emotional intelligence become real, tangible, and urgent. Instead of just listing traits or definitions, you're showing people what emotional intelligence looks like in action. And when people can see it, they can relate to it, and they're more likely to care. The key is to pick a scenario that's universal, something almost everyone has experienced. It doesn't have to be dramatic or extreme. It could be a disagreement at work, a misunderstanding with a friend, or even a small moment where patience and self-control make all the difference. When you do this, you're giving your audience a mirror. They see themselves in the story, and they start thinking, oh, I've been that person. I've reacted without thinking. I've let my emotions get the better of me. And that reflection opens the door for learning. People are more willing to hear lessons about emotional intelligence when they feel personally connected. Another benefit of starting with a relatable scenario is that it sets the tone for the rest of your speech. It establishes a conversational rhythm, a feeling that you're not just lecturing, but talking to them, sharing insights from life, not just from a textbook. And in the style of someone like Steve Harvey, it also gives room for humor, for pauses, for audience interaction. You can exaggerate the chaos, add a little comedic timing, or ask them to picture themselves in that room with you, all of which keeps them engaged. So, starting with a relatable scenario is not optional if you want to truly connect. It is the hook at the foundation. It grabs attention, makes complex ideas accessible, and sets the stage for emotional intelligence to feel not like a distant concept, but like a tool everyone can use in their own lives. The more real, vivid, and universal the scenario, the stronger the connection, and the more impactful your speech becomes. When you're speaking to an audience, words matter, but silence matters even more. That pause after a powerful statement, that moment where let the weight of what you just said sink in, people don't always realize it, but that's where the magic happens. Think about it. When someone tells you something important and then waits a beat before continuing, it grabs your attention in a way that a rapid fire stream of words never can. You notice your brain leans in and your emotions start to engage. Using pauses isn't just about dramatic effect. It's about giving your audience time to process, to feel, and to connect with your message. Imagine saying, "That right there is emotional intelligence." If you rush through it, it sounds like a line in a textbook. But if you pause after "that right there," you let people picture the scene in their own minds, and suddenly they're part of your story. That pause creates anticipation. It makes them curious. It makes them care. And that's what separates an ordinary speech from one that sticks with people long after they've left the room. Pauses also help the speaker. Speaking for several minutes straight can be exhausting, and rushing through words often leads to mistakes or a monotone delivery. A pause gives you a moment to breathe, to gather your thoughts, and to reset your energy. It's like a reset button for both you and your audience. Another reason pauses are powerful is that they create rhythm. A speech that flows naturally with rises, falls, and breaks is easier to listen to. It's not just a wall of words, it's a performance. Think of it like music. Without rest, the song feels cluttered, uncomfortable, and forgettable. With pauses, you highlight the important parts, you emphasize key messages, and you make your speech memorable. And here's the thing, the length of a pause matters. Even a half-second pause at the right moment can change the way people perceive what you're saying. A longer pause after a deep or emotional statement gives your audience space to reflect, to nod, to let it hit them in the gut. It's a subtle tool, but one of the most effective in public speaking. Steve Harvey, for example, uses pauses like a painter uses space in a canvas. He'll tell a story, drop a line, pause just long enough for laughter or understanding to build, and then deliver the next punch. It's timing, it's control, and it's emotional intelligence in action. When you master the art of pausing, you master attention. You make your words matter more than they would otherwise, and you give your audience the chance to connect with your message on a deeper level. A pause is not emptiness. It's presence, it's weight, it's power. Humor is one of the most powerful tools you can use when you're speaking to an audience. It breaks the ice, it grabs attention, and it creates a connection that no lecture or list of facts ever could. But here's the key, it has to be natural. Forced jokes, the kind that make people cringe or roll their eyes, do more harm than good. When you inject humor naturally, it comes from your personality, from the story you're telling, and from the observations you're making about life. It makes your audience feel like they're sitting with a friend, not listening to a teacher. Imagine this. You're talking about emotional intelligence and how important it is to stay calm under pressure. Instead of just stating it, you say, "Now I've been in situations where my blood pressure went up faster than my width for connection, and I had to remind myself to breathe." That simple, relatable line makes people laugh, but it also drives the point home. Humor like this does two things. It relaxes your audience, and it makes the lesson memorable. People remember the laughs, and they remember the lesson that came with it. The trick is to observe life, notice the small absurdities, and share them in a way that connects to your topic. Steve Harvey does this effortlessly. He'll tell a story about a family dinner or a dating disaster, exaggerate it just to be funny, and tie it back to a bigger truth. That's how humor becomes a teaching tool instead of just entertainment. Humor also humanizes you as a speaker. When people laugh at your jokes or smile at your observations, they see you as real, relatable, and approachable. They're more likely to trust you, to listen to what you're saying, and to take your message seriously because it doesn't feel preachy. Another important aspect is timing. A perfectly timed humorous remark can lift the energy in the room, refocus attention, and make your speech dynamic. Pause before the punchline, let your audience anticipate, and then deliver it in a way that feels effortless. Avoid cramming in too many jokes or trying too hard to be funny, because it can overshadow your message. The humor should support a speech, not distract from it. Even small observations or witty comments work wonders. For example, pointing out how everyone checks their phone the moment you start talking, or joking about how patience is tested in the coffee line before work, can get a laugh while subtly tying back to emotional intelligence. And finally, humor encourages engagement. People laugh together, they nod, they react, and that interaction makes your speech lively and memorable. So when you inject humor naturally, you're not just entertaining, you're connecting, reinforcing your message, and making your audience feel like they're part of the story. Humor is the bridge that turns a good speech into an unforgettable one. And when it flows naturally, it feels effortless, authentic, and powerful. Engaging the audience is not just about talking at them, it's about talking with them. When you're on stage, it's easy to fall into the trap of reciting your speech like a script, hoping the words alone will make people pay attention. But anyone who's ever listened to a good speaker knows the difference. Engagement is what keeps people leaning forward in their seats, nodding, laughing, or even wiping away a tear. One of the most effective ways to engage an audience is to ask questions, not because you expect answers, but because it makes people think about themselves. A simple question like, how many of you have ever lost your cool and regretted it later? Immediately shifts the audience from passive listeners to active participants in their own minds. They start reflecting, comparing their experiences to yours, and in that moment, they're no longer just watching a speech. They're living it. Another powerful tool for engagement is storytelling. People remember stories far more than abstract ideas or bullet points. When you tell a story, make it vivid. Describe the sights, sounds, and feelings. Make them picture themselves in the scene. If you can get them laughing, gasping, or leaning in, you've captured their attention and made your message stick. Physical presence matters too. Eye contact, movement across the stage, gestures, and facial expressions are all signals that you are fully present and connected with the people in front of you. Steve Harvey does this masterfully. He doesn't just talk to the room. He talks to individuals. He scans the audience, makes eye contact, points, gestures, and even pauses to let reactions roll in. That interaction, even without direct conversation, creates a sense of intimacy and connection. Humor, as we discussed earlier, also enhances engagement. When you make people laugh, they relax and their defenses come down. Suddenly, they're more open to your message, more willing to consider new ideas, and more likely to remember what you said. Personal anecdotes, relatable examples, and a conversational tone all help the audience feel like they are part of a dialogue rather than a lecture. And it's not just about keeping their attention, it's about creating an emotional experience. People don't just want to hear your message, they want to feel it. If you can make them feel inspired, challenged, or motivated, your speech becomes more than words on a stage. It becomes an experience that resonates. Finally, engagement is also about responsiveness. Pay attention to the audience's energy. If they seem restless, adjust your pacing, add a story, or throw in a rhetorical question to draw them back in. The audience is not passive furniture. They are active participants in the energy and flow of your speech. When you engage them fully, you create a dynamic exchange, and that exchange is what makes a speech memorable, impactful, and even life-changing. Repeating key phrases in a speech is one of the simplest yet most powerful tools you have to make your message stick. Think about the times you've heard someone say something over and over in a way that just lodges itself into your mind. It's not repetition for the sake of filling time. It's repetition for impact, for emphasis, for memory. When you repeat a phrase, you're signaling to your audience, this is important. Pay attention. This is something you need to remember. For example, in a speech about emotional intelligence, if you keep returning to the idea that people should respond, not react, the phrase becomes a mental anchor. Every time you say it, it reinforces the lesson, and by the third or fourth mention, it's no longer just words, it's a concept that sticks in their minds. Repetition also builds rhythm. A well-placed recurring phrase creates a cadence that your audience subconsciously anticipates. It adds musicality to your speech, making it easier to listen to and more pleasurable to follow. Steve Harvey uses this technique all the time. He'll hit on a key idea early in his story, circle back to it with a humorous twist, and then return to it one more time with a serious punch. By the end of the speech, the audience doesn't just remember the words, they remember the feeling behind them. Another benefit of repeating key phrases is that it reinforces understanding. People process information differently. Some catch the meaning the first time. Others need to hear it multiple times to fully grasp it. By returning to important points, you ensure that everyone in the room, regardless of how quickly they absorb information, comes away with the same takeaway. But it's not just about saying the phrase over and over. The way you repeat it matters. Change the tone, add a pause, inject a story, or even use humor when you circle back to it. That keeps the repetition fresh and prevents it from becoming monotonous. Each repetition should feel purposeful, like a drumbeat keeping time, guiding the audience's attention and reinforcing the message. Repetition also creates connection. When people hear the same phrase multiple times, it starts to resonate with them. They might even find themselves saying it in their heads, internalizing it. It becomes more than a line in your speech. It becomes part of their thinking, part of how they approach situations in life. Finally, repeating key phrases signals confidence. When a speaker consistently emphasizes a point, it shows they truly believe in it. Audiences respond to that confidence. They trust a message more when they sense the speaker is unwavering, consistent, and deliberate. In short, repetition isn't filler. It's a strategic, psychological, and emotional tool. Used effectively, it ensures your words don't just pass through ears. They lodge in hearts and minds, creating lasting impact. Ending a speech with inspiration is one of the most powerful ways to leave a lasting impression. People will forget details, they may forget the jokes, and some may even forget the statistics you shared, but they will always remember how you made them feel at the very end. That final moment is your opportunity to plant a seed in their hearts, to spark a thought, a feeling, or a motivation that stays with them long after they leave the room. When you end with just finishing a speech, you're giving your audience a call to action, a reason to apply what they've learned, and a sense of possibility that they can carry into their own lives. The key to doing this effectively is to tie your ending back to the core message of your speech. If your topic is emotional intelligence, then the closing should remind them of its value and power. It should make them feel, deep down, that mastering their emotions, Understanding others and building strong relationships is not just a skill, but a pathway to a better life. One of the most effective ways to inspire is to speak from authenticity. Share a personal story, a moment of struggle, or a breakthrough you experienced. When people see that you've walked the path, that you've faced challenges and grown from them, they connect with you. They think, if they can do it, so can I. Steve Harvey often ends his speeches and shows by sharing personal truths or lessons that feel real and lived. It's not about perfection, it's about relatability and hope. Another strategy is to use vivid imagery or powerful language that sparks imagination. Paint a picture of what life could look like if the audience applies the principles you've discussed. Describe the calmness they could achieve, the stronger relationships they could build, or the confidence they could feel in challenging situations. Make it tangible, make it feel achievable, and make it aspirational. Ending with inspiration also works by appealing to emotion. Speak to the heart, not just the mind. Challenge your audience to reflect on their own lives, to see opportunities they may have missed, and to commit to growth. Emotions drive action far more effectively than facts alone. Encourage them to believe in themselves, to step into their potential, and to see setbacks not as failures, but as opportunities for growth. A pause at the right moment before your final line can make your words hit even harder. Silence is a tool that lets the audience absorb, reflect, and feel the weight of your message. Then, when you deliver that last powerful statement, it lands with maximum impact. Inspiration is also about hope and empowerment. Leave people feeling that no matter the challenges they face, they have the tools, the wisdom, and the emotional intelligence to navigate life successfully. You want to nod out of the room energized, motivated, and confident that they can take the next step toward becoming the best version of themselves. Ending with inspiration is not optional, it's essential. It's the bridge that turns a speech from words into transformation, from information into action, and from listening into living. When done well, it ensures that your message resonates long after the applause fades.